What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astrodfs bringing you a brand new video. Today's video going over Week 13's main slate cash and tournament plays. So, gonna go through cash first and then kind of go through tournament at each position, and just let you guys know where I'm at, kind of where the field is at, right? So I don't have the predictions of what every ownership is going to be. But if you're doing projections, you're kind of getting a basis of where ownership's going to be. It makes it a little easier. So for cash, few quarterbacks here. Jalen Hurts at 7,700. A really healthy environment on the road against Baltimore, who's just terrible against quarterback, terrible against wide receiver. Facing a team that just really hasn't had to pass the ball a whole lot this season. Obviously, their offensive line and running back is just something else, right? It's special. So they really haven't had to pass a whole lot, right? We're not seeing any big passing games out of Jalen Hurts this season. Now, we are getting some good fantasy numbers out of Jalen Hurts, right? That comes with rushing touchdowns, but as for passing yards, like, we're not seeing a whole lot of big games out of him this year. They just really haven't had to use him that much. 13 passing touchdowns on the year, but against a Baltimore team, Lamar fights against every team he plays. That's just how he's going to go, right? He's going to go until they take him off the field because he really, really wants to win. So with that game, like, Lamar's a good tournament, but I think Jalen Hurts is kind of the better option in this one. Going down, I will say CJ Stroud is on my list. He's got to be on my list at 6,400. On the road against Jacksonville, right? One of the worst secondaries in football. A division game. Hopefully Trevor Lawrence is in this one to make this one better. But week 4 against Jacksonville, CJ Stroud gets you 26 DraftKings points in that one. Hits a 300-yard bonus, 2 passing touchdowns. So now you're getting him for $600 cheaper. So CJ Stroud on my list again. And then I'll go down here, and my 2 quarterbacks, right, I'm going to be a little different. I have Matt Stafford as a cash play at 5,800 and Justin Herbert at 5,600. Both these guys I have in my cash player pool. So not having a set line yet, but, guys I'm considering. Matt Stafford, you got to think on the road against New Orleans, to where New Orleans has somehow managed to stay in games. Matt Stafford, since getting Puka and Cooper Kupp, has had some really good fantasy games, right? And if you consider his price point and the numbers, it pays off, right? Week 9 against Seattle at 5.7 pays off with almost 19. Week 10 against Miami doesn't pay off. Week 11 definitely pays off with 27. And then last week against Philly, even though they get blown out like at 5.8, he still gets you 19.2. So the numbers have been there for Matt Stafford's salary. And then Justin Herbert, right? Justin Herbert's just been on a hell of a tear lately. Especially if you look at his fantasy numbers, and that comes with rushing. I didn't think we'd be saying this, but Justin Herbert is rushing quite efficiently lately, and getting a decent amount of points out of it, right? 2 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. But you look at the yardage, the passing touchdowns, a lot to like here. Atlanta, a terrible defense, does not get pressure. The Chargers do not allow Justin Herbert to get pressured. J.K. Dobbins out, so you have Gus Edwards as a running back, so you don't really have that explosiveness right now. So, yeah, Justin Herbert's really, really likable on this slate. Now, people will say Anthony Richardson. I'm okay with Anthony Richardson. My worry and concern with playing Richardson, though, is the Colts are going to be down 2 offensive linemen. Granted, the Patriots defense has kind of been poor. No Josh Downs for Richardson, so that is where I am very skeptical about Anthony Richardson. Now, granted, you look at the split difference, and yeah, he's playing better on the road and home, but it is risky for me to play Richardson. I'd rather play 2 guys with safer games than Indy and New England, right? There could be a chance it's a low-scoring game. At least with Justin Herbert, Atlanta's going to fight. They're at home. They have a really good offense. Matt Stafford's is riskier with New Orleans because New Orleans has been able to. I mean, we could look at Derek Carr here. and since acquiring MVS and Taysom Hill being there, like they've been doing all right, right? They've been putting up 20 plus points a game. Granted, you look at the defenses, Carolina and Cleveland are two of those games. So yeah, it is risky, but I do like those games more. Now for tournaments, I like Joe Burrow at home against Pittsburgh in that division game. Cincinnati's in a must-win situation from here on out the rest of the season, right? They have to win almost every game, if not every game, just to make the playoffs. In a division game, I mean, Joe Burrow's having an MVP type season, so I want to get exposure to him. Some good matchups for his receivers. It's going to be a colder game. I mean, you just look at Joe Burrow all this season, and especially as of late, 3 games in a row over 30 DraftKings points, and he's not getting it through rushing, right? All passing. So Joe Burrow is likable. I want to get exposure to that. Baker Mayfield against Carolina at 6,600. Carolina's been fighting, and that makes it enticing for opposing quarterbacks, right? They have to stay involved in the games. It's not just give it to the running back, kill the clock, defense winning out. Baker Mayfield's been a guy that definitely pays off per his salary, right? He's done it a lot this season. Not every game, obviously, but a lot this season he has done that. Now, he is still 6,600, right? Like price adjusted for what he's done this season, but getting Mike Evans back, the running backs being used quite a bit in the receiving game. Carolina just, very bad defensively, and it's a good thing their offense is fighting because it makes it likable. So Baker Mayfield definitely. Sam Darnold, I want to have exposure with Sam Darnold, right? One of the hotter offenses in football to where when they're going, they're going. And Sam Darnold's another guy that has paid off quite a bit this season for his price point. So in that matchup where we could see, Minnesota's defense has had some games where they don't look good against offenses, and man, the blitzes aren't there. Sam Darnold turns the ball over. So there are situations to where Arizona can fight back. It's not the prettiest game script, but I do like Sam Darnold in tournaments. Continue to go down. I will say, if Trevor Lawrence is healthy, I do like Trevor Lawrence at 5,400. Like, he has to play. He has to play and be healthy. Obviously, he has to play, but if he plays, I like Brian Thomas a lot, right? The last time we saw Trevor Lawrence was against Philly, and with 2 rushing touchdowns, he paid off, right? But you look at his fantasy points he's had this season, 10 has been his floor this year. Granted, he doesn't have Gabe Davis. He doesn't have Christian Kirk. You still have an emerging Brian Thomas. You still have Evan Ingram. I'm not going to say any other receivers' names because they're darts at this point. But you look at their matchup in Week 4, 33 pass attempts for him, 2 touchdowns. They were controlling the game a good amount there. So these weren't the prettiest throws by any means, and they were on the road. Now they're at home. You look at Trevor Lawrence's numbers at home, and I mean he's had way better numbers at home than on the road. So I'm not saying it's the greatest thing, but if Trevor Lawrence plays at 5,400, I like it for tournaments. He's probably going to be lower owned. If Houston's offense destroys Jacksonville's defense, Trevor Lawrence is going to play from behind. I like that there. And then Bryce Young. I have to mention Bryce Young playing against a Tampa defense that's been very up and down, but for the most part down in passing. Rushing, they've been really good. But you look at Bryce Young's last 4 games. I talked about it last week against Kansas City. I mean, it doesn't entirely pay off, but I mean, 4.6 getting 16.5. I think that does. Now has another good division game against Tampa Bay here. They're at home, which, yet again, another quarterback whose numbers are better at home than on the road. And I just think if you really want to get cheap and be able to get some of these running backs, I think there's a lot of good wide receiver plays, especially above 7K this week. and a few good tight end plays. I think getting exposure to someone like Bryce Young at 4.7 is worth taking a shot on this week, right? I don't expect a 20-point game, but if he continues to get somewhere around 15, 16 points, it pays off. Going to running backs for cash, few names on here. I think you could, if you want to throw Mixon in consideration for cash, I'm fine with it. I'd rather go Kamara, though, on this slate. Facing a defense that's been pretty bad against running backs. Kamara is just a huge volume machine. Obviously, you look in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, like he's not paying off for his price point at all. He's paid off once, and that was against Carolina. Now gets a Rams team to where, I'll say this. Look at the teams they've faced, though. They faced Cleveland, Atlanta, Carolina, Chargers, Denver, Tampa, Kansas City, Atlanta again, Philly. They're playing a lot of good run defense teams. The Rams aren't a great run defense team, so I like the opportunities for Kamara in here. It gets a lot of opportunities. His price is going down, right? We haven't seen this price since week 8, so Alvin Kamara is a cash play for me. I just think for $300 cheaper, there's some other cheaper plays is why Mixon's not a cash. I'm just going to get out of the way. He is a tournament play, though, at 8K. Going down farther is Kyren Williams at 7,200. Yet again, another guy who is going down in price from where we once saw him, where he was just getting consistent numbers. We're seeing him go back down, and now he's 7,200 against, yet again, a team that gives up a lot of fantasy points to running backs. Kyren Williams, you look at his numbers, have dipped off since both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have been back. But the thing I'm going to throw out there is Kyren Williams was always a consistent guy in getting touchdowns. Over the last 5 weeks, he's got 2 touchdowns. The opportunities in this game will be there for Kyren Williams to get 2 or 3 touchdowns in this one. And at 7,200, getting 2 touchdowns is 12 points right there. He's a guy that's getting consistent work, has been consistent in the yardage. He has not gotten receiving work the last 2 weeks, but I believe this is a good bounce back week for Kyren. Now, do you want to have exposure to both the passing game and the run game? It's very risky, but I do think it's possible against the Saints defense. Going down even cheaper, Chuba Hubbard at home against Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay good against running backs on the ground. The receiving game is a different story. Chuba Hubbard has been a guy that's gotten a good amount of receiving work this season. With Miles Sanders out, right, you get Jonathan Brooks that fills in. Chuba Hubbard, the better receiving back out of that. And he's just been a huge touchdown machine as of late. 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. And you look, Kansas City is one of those teams, and he still gets 15. Granted, he is up in their price, but for the amount of volume he's going to get, I do think it's noting it for cash. Chase Brown, same thing. A volume machine since Zach Moss has been out. 20 plus opportunities every game, right? 32, 24, and 29 in the 3 games without Zach Moss. And look at the teams he's faced, especially the last 2 weeks. Baltimore and Chargers, 2 teams that are good against running backs. And this guy is still pumping up almost 20 DraftKings points a game. So the price is very cheap at 6,200. If you're looking for a guy that's going to get a lot of volume in a division game, it's going to be Chase Brown, right? He's going to get all of the running back touches. I would assume 90 plus snaps. So Chase Brown at 6,200 is cash. And then the last guy I'm going to throw out there is Bucky Irving at 5,800 on the road against Carolina. Bucky Irving, I've said, is going to take over the Tampa Bay running back spot. Rashard White was just a volume guy. Bucky Irving has been, you can go and look at his numbers just here. Averaging 5.4 yards per carry. In the receiving work, 7.9. 34 targets in 11 games. So averaging about 3 targets a game. And you got to remember, some of that is sharing with, Sean Tucker had the really, really good game. But Rashard White's still been there. So it's not like he's getting all the volume. He's not. Like, they're still using Rashard White. They're still using Sean Tucker in certain situations as well. But Bucky Irving's explosiveness against a defense that is a bottom 5 defense against a running back in both the rush and receive. I believe in rush 100%, but the receiving, I believe they're bottom in that as well. So at 5,800, Bucky Irving is just a good play, right? Now for tournaments, I mentioned Joe Mixon. as being a guy to where he's on that border of being in my cash pool or not. Going down, I think someone like Aaron Jones at 6,500 is also in a really good spot against Arizona. Yet again, a guy that just gets a lot of volume. 26 opportunities in the last week against Chicago, 20 against Jacksonville, 25 against Indy, 21 against the Rams. He's getting volume, right? He's getting volume. They play Tennessee, right? And he gets under 20. But some mid to below average defenses, and he's getting good amount of volume, right? Now, you look at the fantasy points he's had this season, it really hasn't paid off, which is why he's not a cash play. But for a guy that gets volume against a mid-pack defense against a running back, it's worth taking a shot on. Next is Tony Pollard at 6,300 against Washington, who's been bad against running backs. The fact that they're the record they are is mind-blowing to me. But Tony Pollard with possibly without Tajay Spears. I think Tajay Spears will probably play. But even then, Tony Pollard's just got a lot of work, right? And yet again, another running back that's faced some tough defenses. Faced Detroit. New England was a good matchup for him. But also faced the Chargers. Faced Houston. And, I mean, for the most part, he is a guy that gets volume. What he does with the volume is up to him and the offensive line. But, I mean, the receiving game work he's gotten this season is absurd, right? He's not getting a lot of yardage out of it. But, I mean, a guy that's getting, 3 to 4 targets a game every game consistently, like every game. Week 4 against Miami, he got 2. And I believe he got hurt. I could be wrong. I might be thinking of a different week. But, I mean, seeing 3 to 4 targets every game is ridiculous. So, Tony Pollard, just a volume aspect. Brian Robinson Jr., another volume aspect guy to where Austin Eckler's out. Tennessee plays good against running backs, so it's not a great matchup for him. But for a guy that's probably going to get a majority of the work, McNichols is there. He'll get some work too, but Brian Robinson will probably get a majority of that. Ramondre Stevenson has got to be worth giving a shout out to against Indy. They've been a defense that gives up a consistent amount of yards to running backs. Ramondre, I mean, against Miami, wasn't there, but against the Rams and Chicago, got 20 carries in both those games. Granted, the yards per carry have not been there for Ramondre this season, averaging 3.7. But at home, it's worth noting, at home, he's averaging 18.2 DraftKings points a game. You go and look at it against the Rams, against the Jets, against Miami, against Seattle. He's having good games. So I gotta worth mentioning Ramondre Stevenson. I gotta worth mentioning Rashard White at 5,300. Yet again, it's kind of the same thing, just a good matchup. And I found, taking at least props for running backs like Rashard White to where it's kind of split. But, Bucky has that edge of taking props on that backup running back against bottom defenses, like bottom rushing defenses. And it's paid off quite well this season. I'm going to continue to do that trend. But other than that, the only other guy I will definitely worth shouting out is Gus Edwards, 4,300. He is going to get a good amount of volume in this one against Atlanta. Atlanta, pretty good against a running back. Only allowing 127 total rushing yards a game. That's not counting quarterbacks and stuff like that. Obviously, the passing game is where a lot of people are targeting. So if you want some type of leverage in this game, right, you want to fade, let's say Herbert or McConkey or whatever, and you still want to have some exposure. Gus Edwards at 4,300 is very, very cheap for a running back that's going to get a majority of snaps. So, I just think he's too cheap for the amount of volume he's going to get. It's not, yet again, another running back that's not probably going to get explosive plays. We're hoping for, at 4,300, we're hoping for a touchdown, which gets us 6 points. And we're hoping for maybe 80 yards, maybe a reception in there. Anything that equals about 8 points and a touchdown. That gives us 14 points at 4.3 kind of is where we're looking at. So going on to wide receiver, For cash, I'm going to throw out a few names. I'm going to throw out both Rams receivers, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Like, their numbers since both of them being back together have been crazy, right? Week 9 he gets ejected, but Puka Nacua's almost gotten 100 yards, 100 or more in every game besides, week 10 against Miami. But the receptions, 9-7, 9-7, and only one touchdown in those games. So it's not like he's getting those points through touchdown. Touchdown is just a boost. Cooper Kupp's numbers in those games as well. I mean, 16.1, 24.4, 15, 31, 20. So at 7,400, yet again, he is worth taking. Going down on this, I'm going to throw out T. Higgins, Drake London as two other guys, right? T. Higgins' numbers versus man coverage are ridiculous. T. Higgins last week in his return, or in their last game, against the Chargers, 13 targets, 9 for 148, and a touchdown. His numbers all year pretty much have been pretty damn good. So at his price point, 6,600. Granted, this is the most expensive we've seen T. Higgins. They just boosted his price. It's still a good matchup. And then Drake London, his numbers, his matchup, it's just really good. It's a good run back piece if you want to get Justin Herbert, Lane McConkey. Drake London is very cheap enough. At his price point is 6,500. Lad McConkey, 6,100, definitely a cash play for me. Just a really good matchup for him against Atlanta. Atlanta kind of banged up in the secondary. Lad McConkey, just a guy that gets a lot of consistent work. Good matchup for him. At his price point, 6,100, which is the cheapest we've seen in 3 weeks. They win him up. Now he's down 200. So I think the pay down is definitely good there. Calvin Ridley at 5,700 on the road against Washington. This guy as of late has just been huge compared to where we saw compared to where we saw in the beginning of the season. Lately, he's just been killing it, right? Just getting a few targets, right? 15 against Detroit, but other than that, nothing crazy. 6, 9, 8, a couple touchdowns. So I think he's a good value-esque type of cash play to where you're not paying a crazy amount. Granted, it's above the average that you start off with, but I still think he is definitely a cash play. And then I'm going to throw out as my last guy that I have in my cash pool as of right now is Brian Thomas Jr. at 5,500 if Trevor Lawrence is back. Trevor Lawrence has to be back for Brian Thomas to be in that player pool, right? The numbers with Trevor Lawrence, crazy. Good matchup versus Houston. Go back to week 4, 6 for 86, a touchdown and a 13-yard rush. But he gets you 21.9 points. Kind of goes up, right? Thankfully, Mac Jones was the quarterback and didn't really do much with him. So we get him back at almost the same price that he was week 4 against Houston, right? He got all the way up to 6,600, had some poor performances. And now we get him at a very cheap price at 5,500, where everything looks good on paper for Houston. We've seen just on Thursday with Miami, Tua and Jonnu Smith have crazy good games from playing from behind. Crazy good games for playing from behind. They lost by a lot, but it's still if you play them, you killed it. You did. If you played both, you had a really good day. So now going to tournaments, Jamar Chase has really good numbers versus man coverage as well. Really good opportunities for him versus Pittsburgh. He is a guy that is just showing up this season, right? Over 1,000 yards already. Over 10 touchdowns already this season. Those last 4 games, all over 10 targets. Now the yardage has been kind of up and down. The touchdowns have definitely been there, and they'll be there in this one as well. So really like Jamar Chase. AJ Brown, right, is going to face man coverage against Baltimore. That is what they do. AJ Brown is the best wide receiver, I believe, the best wide receiver in the league versus man coverage. Devontae Smith has been banged up. It does seem like he'll probably play. If he is out, AJ Brown might move to cash for me. I don't know if I really need to get there. But his numbers versus man are just crazy. So getting exposure at 8,300 in that game, or getting a piece of that game, you want to have a piece of a game that has a 50 total. Whether it's Philly, Baltimore, both, you want to get some type of exposure. Nico Collins, another tournament play where Nico Collins is a solid wide receiver, right? No, he's not just a solid wide receiver. He's a good wide receiver. He's been solid in this system, but 41 receptions for 713 yards, somehow averaging 101 yards a game. So getting that DraftKings bonus a game on average. Granted, they're not at home because CJ Stroud plays amazing at home. They're on the road, which he plays kind of, I wouldn't say worse, but the reason Nico Collins isn't in a cash play for me personally is just how bad Jacksonville's defense is in total. And it's been very clear that Houston's not doing what they did last year, to where they had Stroud keep them in games and win them games, and do a lot of play action and stuff like that. They're using Joe Mixon a lot. That is my concern of Nico Collins. I still think he's going to have a really good game. But there is that scenario where they run the ball a lot. They control the clock. Nico Collins has a good game, not a crazy good game. Tank Dell has a good game. Dalton Schultz has a really good matchup as well. And that's why I don't have him in cash, right? You get Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp cheaper. So I'm going there. Garrett Wilson, 6,900 against Seattle. I'm just going for the price that we're getting Garrett Wilson at, right? Kind of been up and down just depending on his weeks. Last 2 weeks really hasn't done it. Under 10 fantasy points. So I think it's a really good bounce back game for him if the Jets can get their offense rolling. But the team is just in shambles right now. George Pickens, definitely a tournament play at 6,800 for me. Another wide receiver that just has that boom upside, where we've seen him have some pretty good games at his price point. Granted, DraftKings is priced him up. He's 6,800, so it's really hard. Like, if you consider it for what you need over 20, 22 DraftKings points? How many times has he done it this year? 1 against the Jets. He's facing a defense that has just been very bad. The reason Cincinnati's in the spot they're at is 1, unluck. A lot of their losses is just unlucky. But 2, their defense just has not been good. So I want, if I'm taking Joe Burrow in a receiver, George Pickens is a good run back piece. Mike Evans is in a really good matchup against Carolina. See him last week against the Giants. 6 targets, 68 yards, nothing crazy out of him. Rashard White, Bucky Irving have really good games. So didn't really need to use the pass game too much. To receivers and tight ends, it was pretty much just running back. So I do think he's in a really good spot, though, for me. JSN, if I'm targeting, if I want to go the Jets route and have a run back piece, JSN is in a good matchup against the Jets, to where he's not going to see Sauce. He's not going to see DJ Reed. So he's going to be the slot receiver. That's where he is. That's where he lines up the majority of the time. And that's kind of been the place that the Jets have gotten beat, is the slot. So over the last 3 weeks, JSN is just putting up some really good numbers, especially for his price point. And for a 19.7 performance against Arizona, his price doesn't move. So definitely worth going for in tournaments. Marvin Harrison at 6K. I was very, 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 very disappointed by Marvin Harrison. Right, Trey McBride was the guy. But Marvin Harrison, 3 for 47. Arizona scores 6 points. Just 6 targets against Seattle. So, sorry. It's a good matchup for him against Minnesota. I don't know what else to do. I don't know. I said last week there was few games this season where he was going to have a good matchup. In my opinion, that was a good matchup. It wasn't for Arizona, though. Guess what? He's got one again against Minnesota. He's just cheap. The potential he has is so high. He's just got to get targets, got to get the ball. Tank Dell is the same thing as Nico Collins. I just like Tank Dell for his price point. Granted, Nico Collins is the guy. Joe Mixon is the guy. Tank Dell is kind of the third guy they're going to. But at his price point, dropping down to 5,900 to where Tank Dell went up there in price, right? Once Stephon Diggs went down, once Nico Collins went down, his price is up there. Now he's back down to a normal price of where he's realistically been this season. So for this matchup for him, his numbers are very, 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 very similar to Nico Collins for the matchup. His price point, 5,900, definitely think it's worth taking a shot on. If you want, a piece and you don't want Drake London, Darnell Mooney's in just as good of a spot as Drake London. The matchup slightly favors Drake London. The red zone targets are there for London over Mooney, but Mooney's still got a good matchup as well. If you don't want to go, Justin Jefferson, you want to go the guy that just had the really good game, but 17 targets in the last 2 games for Jordan Addison, gotten a touchdown in both of them, and only goes up $200. Yeah, Jordan Addison's in a really good spot there. Going down for some other pieces, I'm not going to take too much longer on the wide receivers. Michael Pittman for his price point, $5,200 without Josh Downs. Demario Douglas in a good matchup against Indy, $4,700. Rashad Bateman at $4,400, right, getting a cheap piece of that game. Westbrook and Keeney, I'll continue to mention for the touchdown upside he gets, he's been paying off for his price point. Granted, he is $4,300, so his price is starting to get adjusted. It's not as good. And I have to throw out MVS. I don't want to, but I have to. I have to throw out MVS. I do. His last 2 games with the Saints, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I have to throw it out there. I really didn't want to, but I did. Demarcus Robinson, a cheap piece for the Rams-New Orleans game at $4K. Other than that, Andre Iosivas has got a good matchup against Pittsburgh. Not who you think it is, not DJ Moore. It's David Moore for the Carolina Panthers at $3,500. It is kind of a good piece to go to. With Jalen Coker being out, 10 targets, 6 for 81 and a touchdown. So, I mentioned I like Bryce Young in the passing game in that one. It's kind of a piece to get there. So, that's kind of it for wide receivers. Tight ends cash, 3 tight ends and cash I'm looking at. Taysom Hill at 5K, TJ Hawkinson at 4.4, Dallas Goedert at 4.3. Those are kind of my 3 I'm looking at. Obviously, the cheapest piece that you could get for upside on Philly's offense is Dallas Goedert at 4,300. So I think if that's a piece you want to go to, Baltimore's been pretty bad against tight ends. TJ Hawkinson is just the volume aspect he's gotten right in the last 2 out of 3 weeks. He's gotten 18 targets in those 2 games, seen some upside. Seems like they're just keeping Justin Jefferson in the back pocket. And then Taysom Hill just getting a lot of volume, right? Passing game, receiving game, rushing, all of it is there for him in a good matchup against New Orleans. So obviously I don't think he's going to get another 3 touchdown performance, but the upside is there. Now in tournaments, I do like Trey McBride against Minnesota. If Trevor Lawrence is back, I do like Evan Ingram against Houston. I do like Cade Otton against Carolina, right? The top 3 worst defensive tight ends. It is concerning. His last 2 games, right, have been very disappointed compared to where that stretch went. And granted, he went down 1,000, but it is worrisome with Mike Evans being back and how much they're using running backs. Hunter Henry's in a really good spot at 4,200 as well. It's just taking a shot on, the Patriots is tough. And not to mention, if we could get it really quick, Austin Hooper has been getting volume as well. So it's not just saying Hunter Henry's getting all the work. Austin Hooper has been getting work as well. If you throw Austin Hooper's numbers in for Hunter Henry, then Hunter Henry's having a killer season. But unfortunately, Austin Hooper is there. Will Dissly, yet again, if you want a cheap piece to this game, 4K Will Dissly, a guy that's just getting, nothing crazy, but getting 6 targets, 4 targets. I don't love it, but it's just a guy that's on the field majority of the time at the tight end position. and getting some type of volume. Pat Freiermuth at 3,500 on the road against Cincy. Cincy is another team that's bad against tight ends. Granted, yet again, Pat Freiermuth is not a guy that's going to blow you away with fantasy points. He's not. He's in the Arthur Smith offense, which means any guy at any time can have a really good week. You could have a superstar and he'll have a really bad week because Arthur Smith said so. Dalton Schultz is in a really good matchup at 3,300 on the road against Jacksonville. Jacksonville, just top to bottom, just a very bad defense. So getting exposure to any piece on that Houston offense is definitely worth doing. Other than that, Juwan Johnson, just a good matchup for him. Granted, he splits with, Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau, so it's not would never be cash. And then last but not least, Tommy Tremble, 2,800. Jatavion Sanders out. Tampa been very bad against tight ends. Granted, in his career, Tommy Tremble's never been anything extraordinary for fantasy. Not trying to take anything personal football related away from him, but fantasy wise just hasn't gotten anything. But at 2,800, I definitely think it's worth taking a shot on him this week. And just tournaments, right? Well, this is not cash. This is tournaments where you can make a case for anything. I'm not gonna go over defenses. I don't like. It's defenses. A touchdown saves a defense. It always does. Obviously, Tampa against Carolina. If Trevor Lawrence is out, Houston against Jacksonville. Seattle against the Jets, kind of a good one. The cheat defenses. You could say Arizona against Minnesota. You could say the Jets against Seattle. It's defenses. I'm not gonna go crazy into them. So I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. If you guys are interested in joining us, the link for our website will be down in the description. If you're interested in getting my player pools as well as my bets and props and our FanDuel side of this, that is all available on the website for our subscribers. So check that out if you guys are interested. Very cheap subscription package, and I will see you guys in the next one.